I never thought a mailbox would become my hill to die on, but after the sixth time that plow driver destroyed it, something inside me snapped like a twig under a boot heel. My name is Ryan Thompson, and I bought my house in Greenfield, Massachusetts 3 years ago. It was a decent neighborhood, the kind where people mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and waved at each other from their driveways. The house itself was a 2-story colonial with blue shutters. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. What I didn't realize when I signed those closing papers was that I was also signing up for an eternal battle with the Greenfield Estates Homeowners Association, led by their fearless president, Patricia Morrison. Patricia was exactly what you'd picture when someone says the word Karen out loud. Mid-40s, blonde hair cut in that distinctive "can I speak to the manager" style, and a permanent expression that suggested she'd just bitten into a lemon. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a "Live, Laugh, Love" bumper sticker, which I always found ironic considering she seemed incapable of doing any of those things. The mailbox situation started in January of my second year in the house. We'd gotten hit with a nasty nor'easter that dumped about 14 inches of snow overnight. I woke up that morning, made myself some coffee, and looked out the window to see my mailbox laying in my front yard like a corpse. The wooden post had been snapped clean off at the base, and the mailbox itself was dented beyond recognition. I figured it was an accident. The plow driver probably misjudged the turn, and these things happen. I went to Home Depot that weekend, bought a new mailbox and post, and spent a cold Saturday afternoon installing it. The ground was half frozen, which made digging the hole an absolute nightmare, but I got it done. 3 weeks later, another storm rolled through. This one was smaller, maybe 6 inches, but when I went out to get my mail that afternoon, I found my mailbox in the same condition as before. Demolished. The post was cracked, the box was crushed, and there were fresh plow marks in the snowbank right where my mailbox had been standing. This time I was annoyed. I called the HOA office and got their secretary, a mousy woman named Linda who always sounded terrified. "Hi, Linda, this is Ryan Thompson on Maple Drive. The plow driver hit my mailbox again." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Thompson. I'll make a note of it." "A note? Linda, this is the second time. I need to speak with whoever's in charge of the snow removal." "That would be Mrs. Morrison. She handles all the contractor relationships. Of course it was Patricia. Can you transfer me to her? She's not in right now, but I'll have her call you back." Patricia never called me back. I left 2 more messages over the next week, both of which went ignored. So I did what any reasonable person would do and showed up at the HOA office in person. The Greenfield Estates HOA operated out of a small brick building near the neighborhood entrance. It was supposed to be a community center, but Patricia had basically turned it into her personal fiefdom. When I walked in, Linda was at the front desk, and she looked up at me with the expression of someone who'd just seen their own execution date. "Is Patricia here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "She's in a meeting right now. I'll wait." I sat down in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs and pulled out my phone. 20 minutes later, Patricia emerged from her office, alone. There had been no meeting. "Ryan," she said, my name coming out of her mouth like something distasteful. "What can I do for you? Your plow driver has destroyed my mailbox twice now. I need to know what the HOA is going to do about it." She crossed her arms over her chest. "The snow removal contract clearly states that homeowners are responsible for ensuring their mailboxes are set back the appropriate distance from the road. If your mailbox is in the plow's path, that's not the HOA's problem." "Patricia, my mailbox is in the exact same spot as everyone else's on my street. In fact, Mine is actually further back than the Johnsons across the street, and their mailbox is fine. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you should move it back further. Or maybe you could talk to the Plow driver about being more careful. She gave me a thin smile. I'll pass along your concerns. Is there anything else? I knew a brick wall when I was talking to one. I left the office, bought another mailbox, and installed it that weekend. This time I added some extra support, using a thicker post and more concrete. I even moved it back another 6 inches, just to be safe. You can probably guess what happened next. The third storm came in February and my mailbox was obliterated again. But this time, I was ready. I'd installed a cheap security camera pointed at the street after the second incident, and I had the whole thing on video. The footage showed the Plow truck coming down my street at around 5 in the morning. The driver, a heavy-set guy with a beard, wasn't even trying to avoid the mailboxes. In fact, as he approached mine, he actually steered slightly toward it. The Plow blade caught the post and sent my mailbox flying. And here's the kicker. After he hit it, I could see him laughing in the cab. I was furious. I downloaded the video to a USB drive and marched back to the HOA office the next day. This time, Patricia wasn't alone. There was a man with her, mid-50s, wearing a flannel shirt and work boots. I recognized him from the video, the Plow driver. I have video evidence, I said, slamming the USB drive on Linda's desk. Your driver deliberately hit my mailbox, and I want to know what you're going to do about it. Patricia picked up the USB drive between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. That's a serious accusation, Ryan. Watch the video, it's all there. Even if what you're saying is true, accidents happen during snow removal. It's part of living in New England. You signed the HOA bylaws when you bought your house, and those bylaws clearly state, I don't care what the bylaws say. This wasn't an accident. He hit it on purpose. The Plow driver, who I later learned was named Gary, finally spoke up. Look, buddy, I got a lot of street to cover when it snows. If your mailbox is in my way, that's your problem. It's not in your way. Every other mailbox on my street is fine. Maybe you should install it better, Gary said with a shrug. I looked at Patricia. You're really going to let him talk to a homeowner like this? Gary is an independent contractor. He's very good at his job, and we're lucky to have him. If you continue to have issues with your mailbox placement, perhaps you should consider moving it further back or installing a more durable model. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So the HOA takes no responsibility for this. That's correct. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do. I left that office shaking with anger. Over the next 2 months, Gary destroyed my mailbox 3 more times. Each time, I had video evidence. Each time, Patricia and the HOA did absolutely nothing. I was spending more on mailboxes than I was on groceries. The 6th time it happened, something in me broke. It was late March, and we'd gotten one of those surprise late-season storms. 6 inches of heavy, wet snow. I heard the Plow truck coming at dawn, and I actually got out of bed to watch. Sure enough, Gary veered right toward my mailbox and demolished it. As he drove away, I could see him raising his coffee cup in a mock salute. That was it. I was done playing nice. I called my buddy Marcus, who owns a welding shop in Springfield. Marcus, I need a favor. A big one. What's up, man? I need you to build me a mailbox that could survive a nuclear war, Marcus laughed. What are you planning? I told him the whole story. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, You know what? I've dealt with my fair share of HOA nonsense. Let me help you out. Come by the shop tomorrow. The next day, I drove to Marcus's shop. He'd been working since early morning, and what he showed me was beautiful in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. The mailbox itself looked normal enough. A standard rural-style box painted black. But the post was something else entirely. Marcus had used a 6-inch diameter steel pipe, the kind they use for industrial applications. The pipe was filled with concrete and rebar, creating a post that probably weighed close to 300 pounds. The whole thing was sunk 4 feet into the ground with a base that spread out 2 feet in every direction, also concrete and rebar. "This thing isn't going anywhere," Marcus said, running his hand along the post. "You could hit it with a car and the car would lose." "It's perfect," I said. "How much do I owe you?" "First beers on you next time we go to O'Malley's. Consider this my contribution to the fight against HOA tyranny." Installing the mailbox was a 2-day project. I had to rent a small excavator to dig the hole deep enough. My neighbors, the Johnsons, came over to watch. "That's quite the mailbox," Mr. Johnson said, a retired accountant with a dry sense of humor. "Just tired of replacing it," I replied. "I heard you've had some trouble with the plow truck." "6 times now," he whistled low. "That's harassment at that point." That's what I tried to tell Patricia. Patricia Morrison is a piece of work. She fined us last year because our grass was a 1/4 inch too tall. A 1/4 inch. She came out with a ruler. Why do people vote her back in every year? Nobody runs against her. Everyone's too intimidated. She's got dirt on half the board and the other half are her personal friends. Mrs. Johnson brought me a glass of lemonade as I finished pouring the concrete base. "You know this is going to make things worse with her, right?" she said. "Probably, but I'm done rolling over." The concrete took 48 hours to cure completely. I used that time to go over the HOA bylaws with a fine-toothed comb. I wanted to make sure my new mailbox was completely compliant. It met all the height requirements, setback requirements, and color requirements. Patricia would have no legitimate grounds to make me remove it. The next snowfall came in early April, one of those freak spring storms that nobody expects. It was small, maybe 3 inches, but it was enough for the HOA to call out Gary and his plow truck. I was up at 4:30 in the morning, coffee in hand, watching from my living room window. My security camera was recording, and I'd also set up my phone to record from a different angle. Whatever happened, I was going to have documentation. Gary's truck came rumbling down Maple Drive right around 5:15. I could see him through the windshield, and I swear he sped up when he saw my house. He probably figured he'd destroy my mailbox for a 7th time, have a good laugh, and go about his day. The plow blade hit my mailbox post with a sound like a gunshot. From my window, I saw sparks fly. The truck lurched violently to the right, and I heard the distinctive sound of metal tearing. Gary's truck kept moving for about 20 feet, then shuddered to a stop. My mailbox was completely fine. Didn't even wobble. I grabbed my coat and ran outside. Gary was already out of his truck, and his face was the color of a tomato. The entire right side of his plow blade was crumpled like a used tissue. The mounting bracket had torn clean off, and I could see hydraulic fluid leaking onto the snow. The front right quarter panel of the truck was also dented, and the headlight was smashed. "What the hell is that thing made of?" Gary shouted when he saw me. "Steel and concrete," I said calmly. "Is there a problem? Look at my truck. You destroyed it." "Actually, you destroyed it when you deliberately hit my mailbox. Again. For the 7th time. This is some kind of booby trap. That's illegal. It's a mailbox. A completely regulation-compliant mailbox that happens to be sturdily built. Maybe if you'd been driving more carefully, you wouldn't have hit it." Gary pulled out his phone and called Patricia. Even from 10 feet away, I could hear her shrill voice coming through the speaker. A few of my neighbors had come out to see what the commotion was about, including the Johnsons, a young couple named the Martinses, and old Mrs. Chen from the corner house. "She wants to talk to you," Gary said, thrusting his phone at me. I took it. "Good morning, Patricia. What did you do?" She screeched. "I installed a mailbox. The same thing I've done 6 times before, except this time I built one that could withstand repeated abuse." "You can't install a steel post like that. It's dangerous." "Show me where in the bylaws it says I can't." I checked. "There's no restriction on mailbox post materials, only on height, setback, and color. My mailbox meets all those requirements." "This is ridiculous. Gary's truck is damaged because of you. Gary's truck is damaged because he deliberately hit my mailbox. Again. I have video evidence of all 7 incidents, including this one. If Gary wants to file an insurance claim, he's welcome to. I'll be happy to provide the footage showing him steering directly toward my mailbox." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "This isn't over." She hung up. I handed the phone back to Gary, who was staring at his destroyed truck with the expression of a man who just realized he'd made a terrible mistake. "You got another Plow truck?" I asked. "What?" "The street's only half done. There's still snow out here. I'm sure the HOA would want you to finish the job." Gary looked like he wanted to punch me, but with all my neighbors watching, he settled for glaring instead. He called a tow truck, and 45 minutes later, his damaged Plow truck was hauled away. A different contractor showed up around noon to finish the job, and that driver gave my mailbox a wide berth. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a notice of violation and a fine for $800. The violation: installation of a dangerous and non-compliant mailbox structure that poses a hazard to HOA contractors and emergency vehicles. I read the letter 3 times, each time getting angrier. They were going to fine me for building a sturdy mailbox after their Plow driver had deliberately destroyed my property 7 times. I called a lawyer. His name was Robert Finch, and he specialized in property law and HOA disputes. I'd found him through a Google search, and his website had a whole section about fighting unreasonable HOA fines. "Mr. Thompson," he said when I sat down in his office in downtown Greenfield, "tell me everything." I laid out the whole story. The 7 destroyed mailboxes, Patricia's refusal to do anything, the video evidence, Gary's deliberate targeting of my property, and now the fine. I'd brought printed copies of all the HOA bylaws, photos of my mailbox showing it met all requirements, and the USB drives with all the video footage. Robert watched the videos with increasing interest. When the last one finished, showing Gary's truck crumpling against my steel post, he actually smiled. "This is good," he said. "Really good." "Good, they're fining me $800. They're fining you based on a violation that doesn't exist. Your mailbox meets all the stated requirements in the bylaws. Height, setback distance, color, everything. There's no provision in here that restricts the material or structural integrity of the mailbox post." That's what I told Patricia. The problem for the HOA is that they're trying to enforce a rule that doesn't exist, which they can't do. Even more problematic for them is that you have video evidence of their contractor repeatedly destroying your property, and evidence that the HOA president was aware of this and did nothing. So what do I do? First, we respond to this violation notice with a formal dispute. We'll cite the relevant bylaws and make it clear that your mailbox is compliant. Second, we're going to file a claim against the HOA for the cost of the 6 mailboxes you had to replace, plus your time and labor installing them. Third, if they continue to push this, we'll countersue for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Will that work? Oh, it'll work. The question is whether they're smart enough to back down before this gets expensive for them. HOAs hate publicity and they hate legal fees. Once they realize you're serious and you have documentation, they'll likely settle. And if they don't, Robert leaned back in his chair, then we take them to court and we win. I've seen the videos, Mr. Thompson. Any judge is going to side with you on this. We filed the dispute letter the next day. It was 6 pages long, meticulously cited the HOA bylaws, and included references to the video evidence. We also included a formal claim for damages in the amount of $947, which was what I'd spent on the 6 replacement mailboxes, concrete, posts, and related materials. Patricia's response came within 24 hours. She called me directly, which was a first. "Ryan, I got your lawyer's letter." "Good. So you'll be withdrawing the fine. We need to talk about this reasonably. There's no need to involve lawyers and make this complicated. It became complicated when your plow driver destroyed my property 7 times and you did nothing about it." Gary says the mailbox damage was accidental. "Patricia, I have video evidence showing otherwise. In multiple videos, you can clearly see him steering toward my mailbox. The last video shows him hitting a steel post so hard it destroyed his truck. That's not accidental. That's negligence at best and vandalism at worst. The steel post is the problem here. It's dangerous. What if someone's car hit it? Then they'd probably wonder why they drove off the road onto my property. The mailbox is set back the required distance, Patricia. This isn't a safety issue. This is you trying to punish me for standing up to your contractor's bullying." There was a long pause. "What do you want?" "I want the fine withdrawn. I want reimbursement for the 6 mailboxes I had to replace. And I want a written apology from the HOA acknowledging that my current mailbox is compliant with all bylaws." "That's ridiculous. I'm not apologizing." "Then I guess we'll see you in court." I hung up. My hands were shaking. I'd never been the confrontational type, but something about Patricia's attitude brought out a stubbornness in me I didn't know I had. Robert filed our formal claim in small claims court 3 days later. The court date was set for 6 weeks out. In the meantime, word had spread through the neighborhood about what happened. I'd become something of a folk hero, apparently. People I'd never even spoken to before stopped me on the street to tell me they were glad someone was finally standing up to Patricia. The Johnsons invited me over for dinner one evening. Over pot roast, Mr. Johnson said, "You know, there are a lot of people in this neighborhood who are tired of Patricia's nonsense. If you ever wanted to run for HOA president, I think you'd have support." "I don't want to be HOA president. I just want to be left alone." "That's exactly why you'd be good at it," Mrs. Johnson said with a laugh. 2 weeks before the court date, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Gary. "Thompson, it's Gary Miller, the Plow driver. What do you want?" "Look, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia's planning to bring a counterclaim against you for the damage to my truck. She's saying your mailbox was an intentional trap designed to damage property." "Why are you telling me this?" he sighed. "Because it's not true, and I'm done being her puppet. She's been pushing me to file the claim, but my insurance already denied it because the video shows I hit a stationary object. That's my fault, not yours. Plus, she's been shorting my payments all winter and using this situation as an excuse not to pay me what she owes." "How much does she owe you?" "Almost $6,000. She keeps saying the HOA budget is tight, but I know that's garbage. There are homeowners who have seen the financial reports, and the HOA has plenty of money." This was interesting. "Would you be willing to testify about this in court?" "Maybe. I don't know. Patricia's got a lot of power around here, and I do work for 3 other HOAs in the area." If she badmouths me, I could lose those contracts. What if I could help you get the money she owes you? How? Come with me to see my lawyer. We'll figure something out. 2 days later, Gary sat in Robert's office with me. He brought all his invoices and payment records. Patricia had been systematically underpaying him all winter, claiming various deductions for quality issues that weren't specified anywhere in their contract. "This is wage theft," Robert said, flipping through the paperwork. "You have a solid case here, Mr. Miller. You should file a claim." "But what about my other contracts? Patricia knows people. Let her try to badmouth you. If she does, that's defamation, and you can sue her for that too. Besides, once word gets out about how she's been treating contractors, those other HOAs might think twice about listening to her recommendations." Gary thought about it for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'm in. What do I need to do?" Robert laid out the plan. Gary would file his own claim against the HOA for the unpaid wages. In the process, he'd provide testimony about Patricia pressuring him to hit my mailbox repeatedly, and then trying to force him to file a fraudulent insurance claim. In exchange, I'd agree not to pursue any damages from Gary personally for the destroyed mailboxes, since it was clear he'd been acting under Patricia's direction. The pieces were falling into place. The court date arrived on a Tuesday morning in mid-May. The courthouse in Greenfield was an old brick building with high ceilings and squeaky floors. I arrived 30 minutes early with Robert. Patricia showed up 15 minutes later with her own lawyer, a nervous-looking man in an expensive suit who kept checking his phone. The small claims court was less formal than I expected. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Judge Sandra Martinez, listened to both sides present their opening statements. Patricia's lawyer went first, arguing that my steel mailbox post constituted a hazard and that I should be held liable for the damage to Gary's truck. Then Robert stood up. "Your Honor, we have video evidence that directly contradicts the plaintiff's claims. Mr. Thompson's mailbox meets all HOA requirements for height, setback, and appearance. The only reason it's constructed more sturdily than average is because the HOA's contractor deliberately destroyed 6 previous mailboxes over a 4-month period, costing Mr. Thompson nearly $1,000 in replacement costs." Judge Martinez looked interested. "You have video evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor. 7 separate incidents, all recorded. We can show them now if you'd like." "Please do." Robert set up a laptop and started playing the videos on the courtroom monitor. The first one showed Gary's first hit on my mailbox, which could potentially be explained as accidental. The second was more questionable. By the third and fourth, even Patricia's lawyer was shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The fifth and sixth videos clearly showed Gary steering toward my mailbox deliberately. The seventh video, the one where Gary's truck was destroyed, was the clincher. You could see him speed up as he approached my house and aim directly for the mailbox post. The sound of the impact echoed through the courtroom speakers. When the videos finished, Judge Martinez was quiet for a moment. Then she turned to Patricia. "Mrs. Morrison, did you know your contractor was deliberately targeting Mr. Thompson's mailbox?" Patricia had gone pale. "Your Honor, I can explain. Did you know? Yes or no?" Mr. Thompson had been difficult about the placement of his mailbox, and that's not what I asked. "Were you aware that Mr. Miller was deliberately destroying Mr. Thompson's property?" Patricia's lawyer whispered something to her. She took a breath and said, "I was aware there had been multiple incidents." "And what action did you take?" "I informed Mr. Thompson that he needed to move his mailbox further back from the road. Even though his mailbox met all the HOA requirements." "The requirements are guidelines, Your Honor. There's discretion, Mrs. Morrison. I've read the bylaws." Mr. Thompson's mailbox met every stated requirement. It appears to me that you allowed your contractor to repeatedly destroy his property, then fined him when he took steps to protect it. Is that accurate? Patricia didn't answer. Her lawyer whispered to her again, and she just nodded. Judge Martinez looked at Robert. You mentioned a counterclaim. Yes, Your Honor. We're seeking reimbursement for 6 destroyed mailboxes, totaling $947, plus court costs. We're also asking that the HOA's $800 fine be dismissed, and that the HOA be required to issue a written statement confirming Mr. Thompson's mailbox is compliant with all bylaws. Mrs. Morrison, do you wish to contest these demands? Patricia's lawyer stood up. Your Honor, if I could have a moment to consult with my client. 5 minutes. Patricia and her lawyer huddled in the corner, having an intense, whispered conversation. I could see Patricia getting more and more agitated. Finally, they came back. Your Honor, the lawyer said, my client is willing to withdraw the fine and reimburse Mr. Thompson for the damaged mailboxes. However, she feels that a public written statement would be inappropriate. Then we'll proceed with the full trial, Robert said immediately. We'll also be adding claims for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress, which would significantly increase the damages we're seeking. Patricia's lawyer went pale, more hurried whispers. Then, Your Honor, we'll agree to all of Mr. Thompson's terms. Judge Martinez nodded. Very well. Mrs. Morrison, the HOA will reimburse Mr. Thompson $947, plus his court costs. The $800 fine is dismissed, and you will provide, in writing, a statement confirming that Mr. Thompson's current mailbox meets all HOA requirements. This agreement will be part of the court record. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said, her voice barely audible. Good. And Mrs. Morrison, if I see you in my courtroom again on a matter like this, I'm going to be significantly less sympathetic. HOAs exist to maintain community standards, not to harass homeowners over personal vendettas. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor. As we left the courtroom, Gary was waiting in the hallway. He'd filed his claims separately, and his hearing was scheduled for the afternoon. How'd it go? He asked. We won. Everything we asked for. Good. Maybe now I'll actually get paid what I'm owed. Good luck in there. You've got the paperwork to back up your claim. Thanks, man, and hey, I'm sorry about your mailboxes. I should have stood up to her earlier. You're standing up to her now. That's what matters. Gary's hearing went just as well as mine. The judge ordered the HOA to pay him the full $6,000 they owed, plus penalties for late payment. Patricia tried to argue that Gary's work had been substandard, but without any documentation to back up her claims, the judge dismissed her arguments. The written statement from the HOA arrived by certified mail a week later. It was a single page, signed by Patricia, acknowledging that my mailbox met all requirements and that the HOA had no grounds to demand its removal or modification. I framed it and hung it in my garage, but the story doesn't end there. Word of the court case spread through Greenfield Estates like wildfire. People were talking about it at the community pool, at the grocery store, at school pickup. Within a month, a petition started circulating to call a special election for HOA president. The petition needed signatures from 30% of the homeowners to force an election. It got 45%. The Johnsons came over one evening with the news. Ryan, people want you to run. I told you I don't want to be HOA president. Just think about it. Patricia's been running this neighborhood like her personal kingdom for 6 years. You could actually make a difference. Or I could just live my life and not deal with all the drama. Mrs. Johnson gave me a look that reminded me of my mother. Sometimes we're called to do things we don't want to do because we're the right person for the job. You stood up to Patricia when no one else would. People respect that. I thought about it for a few days. The idea of running for HOA president was exhausting just to consider. But I kept thinking about all the conversations I'd had with neighbors over the past months. Mr. Johnson and his ruler incident. Mrs. Chen, who'd been fined for having the wrong shade of white on her fence. The Martineses, who'd been cited because their kids' toys were visible from the street. Patricia had turned the HOA into a tool for petty tyranny. Maybe it was time for that to change. I announced my candidacy 2 weeks before the special election. My platform was simple. The HOA should serve the homeowners, not the other way around. I promised to focus on actual community improvements rather than nitpicking violations, to make the budget transparent, and to treat homeowners with respect. Patricia's campaign was equally simple. I was a troublemaker who didn't respect authority, and electing me would lead to chaos and declining property values. The election was held on a Saturday in July at the community center. I'd never seen so many people show up for an HOA meeting. Every chair was filled and people were standing along the walls. Patricia looked confident as she gave her speech, talking about her years of dedicated service and her commitment to maintaining community standards. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. 6 years ago, I moved to this neighborhood because it seemed like a good place to live. And it is a good place, but not because of the HOA. It's a good place because of the people who live here. Good neighbors who help each other out, who care about each other. The HOA should support that, not get in the way of it. If you elect me, I promise to make the HOA work for you, not against you. That's all I've got. The voting took place immediately after the speeches. Paper ballots, counted by 3 neutral homeowners who'd volunteered. It took about 45 minutes to tally all the votes. I won with 68%. Patricia didn't even wait for the official announcement. She grabbed her purse and walked out halfway through the count when it became clear she was going to lose. My first official act as HOA president was to review all outstanding violations and fines. I found dozens of petty citations, including one where Patricia had fined someone for having a pink garden gnome because it wasn't an approved decoration. I dismissed about 70% of the violations and reduced most of the remaining fines to written warnings. The second act was to make the budget fully transparent. I posted it online where every homeowner could see exactly where their dues were going. Turns out Patricia had been spending about $30,000 a year on consulting fees for various services that didn't seem to actually exist. I referred that information to the local district attorney. The third act was to change the snow removal contract. I hired a different company, one with better reviews and a track record of actually being careful around mailboxes. Gary actually applied to be one of their drivers, and I was happy to provide a reference. Life in Greenfield Estates got a lot quieter after that. The HOA still existed, but it focused on things that actually mattered. Maintaining common areas, organizing neighborhood events, dealing with legitimate safety issues. People started enjoying their homes instead of worrying about arbitrary rules. As for Patricia, she moved out of the neighborhood about 6 months after the election. I heard through the grapevine that she'd bought a condo in Florida. The investigation into her financial dealings found enough irregularities that she had to pay back about $15,000 to the HOA, but nothing criminal was charged. Sometimes I wondered if she'd found another HOA to tyrannize down in Tampa, or wherever she ended up. My steel mailbox is still standing, of course. It's become something of a landmark in the neighborhood. People point it out when they're giving directions. Turn left at the indestructible mailbox. Kids sometimes try to climb it when their parents aren't looking. The mail carrier loves it because it's the sturdiest box on her route. I served as HOA president for 2 years before deciding not to run for re-election. I'd accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and I was ready to go back to just being a regular homeowner. The woman who replaced me, Barbara Anderson, was a retired teacher who'd lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. She was competent, fair, and actually seemed to enjoy the administrative work. Looking back on the whole mailbox saga, I'm struck by how a simple piece of infrastructure became the focal point for a much larger issue. It was never really about the mailbox. It was about respect, about standing up for yourself, about refusing to let bullies get away with their behavior just because they have a title and a bit of authority. The funny thing is, after everything that happened, I became friends with Gary. We meet up for beers at O'Malley's every few weeks. He's making good money with the new snow removal company, and has even expanded his business to include landscaping in the summer. He told me once that getting stiffed by Patricia was the best thing that could have happened to him, because it pushed him to take control of his business instead of just accepting whatever scraps the HOAs threw his way. Marcus, my welder buddy, still jokes that he should start a side business building fortress mailboxes for people with HOA problems. I tell him he'd probably make a fortune. The Johnsons became good friends too. We have a standing dinner invitation every month, rotating between our houses. Mr. Johnson taught me how to make his famous ribs, and Mrs. Johnson is trying to teach me gardening with mixed results. My tomato plants keep dying, but I'm getting better at it. On quiet evenings, I sometimes sit on my front porch with a beer and look at that steel mailbox. It's just a mailbox, sturdy and unremarkable, but it represents something more. It represents the moment I decided to stop being passive, to stop accepting unreasonable treatment just because it was easier than fighting back. Would I do it all again? In a heartbeat. Though hopefully without having to go through 6 destroyed mailboxes first. The neighborhood itself changed in subtle ways after Patricia left. People felt more comfortable actually using their yards. Kids played street hockey without worrying about citations. Someone started a neighborhood gardening club, and we created a community vegetable garden in one of the unused common areas. The 4th of July block party that year was the biggest one in a decade. There were still rules, of course. An HOA needs some structure to function. But the rules were reasonable and enforced with common sense, rather than rigid tyranny. If someone's lawn got a bit overgrown because they were dealing with a family emergency, we helped them out instead of fining them. If someone wanted to paint their house a slightly different shade than the approved color, we looked at it and decided whether it actually mattered. I learned something important through all of this. Communities thrive when people feel ownership and respect, not when they're micromanaged and intimidated. The houses in Greenfield Estates didn't become less valuable when we relaxed Patricia's iron grip. In fact, property values went up slightly, probably because the neighborhood became known as a pleasant place to live rather than an HOA horror story. My mailbox took on a symbolic significance I never intended. New homeowners would ask about it during their tours. Real estate agents would mention it. This is the neighborhood where the homeowner stood up to the HOA. It became part of the community identity. One afternoon, about 2 years after the whole incident, a moving truck pulled up across the street. A young couple was moving in their first house based on their obvious excitement. I walked over to introduce myself. "Welcome to the neighborhood, I'm Ryan Thompson." The husband's eyes got wide. "Wait, you're the mailbox guy," I had to laugh. "Yeah, I guess I am. Dude, that's awesome." Our real estate agent told us about it. She said this was the best-run HOA in the county. "We try. Let me know if you need anything. We're pretty friendly around here." As I walked back to my house, I realized that what started as a frustration had turned into something positive. A more functional community, better relationships with neighbors, and a reputation for standing up against unreasonable authority. The steel mailbox still stands at the end of my driveway, a monument to stubbornness and the power of not backing down. Every winter, when the new snow removal company comes through, their drivers give it a respectful wide berth. The mail carrier pats it affectionately sometimes when she's delivering packages. It's funny how life works out. I bought a house in Greenfield Estates looking for a quiet place to live. Instead, I got embroiled in an HOA war over mailboxes, ended up becoming HOA president, and fundamentally changed how the community operated. Not exactly what I planned, but I wouldn't change it. Well, maybe I'd change the part where I had to buy 6 mailboxes in 4 months. That was expensive and annoying, but everything else, worth it. These days I'm back to being a regular homeowner. I go to work, come home, mow my lawn on weekends. The HOA functions smoothly under Barbara's leadership. There are occasional disputes, of course, but they're handled with reason and communication rather than fines and threats. Gary stopped by last week to drop off some venison. He'd been hunting up in Vermont and had more meat than he could use. We stood in my driveway, talking about nothing in particular, and he mentioned that he'd run into Patricia at a gas station during a trip to visit his sister in Fort Myers. "How'd that go?" I asked, awkward as hell. She pretended she didn't recognize me at first, then kind of nodded and hurried away. Looked like she was doing okay, though. Driving a new car seemed healthy. Good for her, I guess. You ever wonder if she learned anything from what happened? I thought about it. Probably not. People like Patricia don't usually change. They just find new places to exercise their need for control. Yeah, you're probably right. Still, I hope she's at least not making anyone's life miserable down there. After Gary left, I sat on my porch and watched the sun set over the neighborhood. Kids were playing basketball in the Martines' driveway. The Johnsons were working in their garden. Mrs. Chen was walking her dog. Normal suburban evening activities, the kind of peaceful ordinariness that makes life good. And at the end of my driveway, my steel mailbox stood guard, a silent reminder that sometimes the right thing to do is plant your feet and refuse to be pushed around. It's just a mailbox, but it means something. It means home. It means community. It means standing up for what's right even when it's hard. The next winter came and went without incident. The snow removal company did their job professionally, and not a single mailbox was harmed. I barely even thought about it, which was exactly how it should be. Spring arrived, and with it came the annual HOA meeting. I attended as a regular homeowner this time, sitting in the back and letting Barbara run the show. She did a great job, presenting the budget, discussing upcoming maintenance projects, and handling questions from homeowners with patience and professionalism. As the meeting wrapped up, a newer homeowner raised her hand. "I just wanted to say thank you to Ryan Thompson. My family moved here last year, and this is the best neighborhood we've ever lived in. The HOA actually helps instead of getting in the way, and I know that's because of the changes he made. So, thank you." A bunch of people started clapping, and I felt my face get hot. I'm not great with public recognition, but I appreciated the sentiment. I gave a little wave and nod, acknowledging the thanks without making a big deal of it. After the meeting, several people came up to chat, thank me again, or just say hello. It felt good to be part of a real community, one where people actually cared about each other rather than just following rules to avoid fines. As I drove home that evening, I passed my mailbox and felt a sense of satisfaction. It had been 3 years since Gary's truck met its match against that steel post. 3 years since I decided to stop being a passive victim and start standing up for myself. 3 years since I'd learned that sometimes the right thing to do is build something strong enough to withstand whatever gets thrown at it. My phone rang just as I pulled into my driveway. It was Marcus. "Hey man, you busy? Just got home from the HOA meeting. What's up?" "I've got a buddy in Worcester who's having HOA problems. His deck is 6 inches too wide according to some bylaw and they're fining him. He asked if I knew any lawyers who deal with this stuff. Tell him to call Robert Finch. He's good." "Will do." "Hey, while I have you on the phone, you want to grab beers at O'Malley's this weekend? Gary's coming too." "Sure, I'm in. Saturday? Perfect. See you then." I hung up and looked at my house. Just a regular colonial in a regular neighborhood in Massachusetts. But it was mine, and I'd fought for the right to live here in peace. The mailbox at the end of the driveway was proof of that. Sometimes I still get messages from people in other HOAs who have heard my story. They're dealing with their own Patricias, their own unreasonable rules and petty tyrants. I always tell them the same thing. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Most HOAs will back down when faced with someone who refuses to be bullied. The steel mailbox has become more than just a practical solution to a problem. It's become a symbol, a conversation starter, a reminder that ordinary people can win against petty bureaucracy when they're willing to fight for what's right. Would my life have been easier if I just moved my mailbox back further after the first incident? Probably. Would it have been the right thing to do? Absolutely not. Patricia and Gary were in the wrong, and backing down would have just enabled their behavior. Standing up to them was the right choice, even though it was harder. It led to positive changes for the whole community, not just for me. That's worth more than the cost of 6 mailboxes and the stress of a court case. As I walked into my house that evening, I felt grateful. Grateful for good neighbors, for a lawyer who knew his stuff, for a welder friend who built me an indestructible mailbox, and for a community that was willing to make changes when change was needed. The mailbox saga taught me that home isn't just about the building you live in. It's about standing up for yourself, being part of a community, and refusing to let petty tyrants make your life miserable. It's about drawing a line and saying no more when that line gets crossed. My steel mailbox still stands at the end of my driveway, solid and unmovable, a testament to the power of standing your ground. And every time I check my mail, I'm reminded that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can lead to the biggest changes. Life in Greenfield Estates is good now. The HOA functions the way it should, the neighborhood is thriving, and people actually enjoy living here. All because one guy got tired of replacing his mailbox and decided to do something about it. I never set out to be a neighborhood hero or an HOA reformer. I just wanted my mail to be delivered without my mailbox getting destroyed every few weeks. But sometimes that's how change happens. Someone gets fed up with the status quo and decides to take action. That action inspires others. Before you know it, the whole system changes. The steel mailbox at the end of my driveway isn't going anywhere. It'll probably outlast the house itself. And years from now, long after I've moved on to wherever life takes me next, someone will ask about that incredibly sturdy mailbox on Maple Drive. And hopefully, someone will tell them the story of how one homeowner stood up to an HOA bully and won. That's a legacy I can live with. That and the fact that my mail always gets delivered safely now.